Hello, everyone, and welcome to BodyBags. I'll be your reviewer for today. I'm Lonnie from Tats. And as you already know, this week, if you've been watching all the videos, you know that we've been highlighting horror films from the year 1979. And the one that I picked is a personal favorite of mine. I think it's a really, really good film, and I strongly recommend it. The movie that I chose is When a Stranger Calls. Now I know everybody probably looking at this being like, what the hell is wrong with you? You got that Mill Creek Blu-ray with, where it's on a double bill with Happy Birthday to Me. Honestly, I'm fine with this. I'm not really like, oh my God, the world's gonna come to an end if I don't have these separately. It's like, it looks fine, it plays fine, it's okay by me. But anyway, enough about that. All right, so go a little bit of backstory, okay? In 1977, Fred Walton, who co-wrote and directed this film, he co-wrote and directed a short film called The Sitter. Now, he made his short film. Then I'm guessing probably what ended up happening was in 1978, this little film came out. You'll see the poster in the background called Halloween. And the movie Halloween, the story, is about babysitters being stalked by a psycho killer. The movie came out, not overnight, but over time it did become a huge success. Big financial, hit movie, the biggest independent film of all time, so on. And so I imagine after the success of Halloween, I'm pretty sure they were probably, trying to figure out, okay, we need, Halloween was a big hit, we need movies like that. And so they probably came across this little film that Fred Walton co-wrote and directed called The Sitter. And they decided, you know what? This movie is a nice combination of both Halloween and Black Christmas, which John Carpenter did admit, there was some inspiration from Black Christmas that went into Halloween. And so they they got together, I'm sure, with Fred Walton and say, hey, can you take this little film of yours, expand it into a feature? And he did, and this is what we got. The story is pretty simple, okay? We begin with this young girl, Jill Johnson, played by Carol Kane there, who, just a real side note, just a quick side note, okay? If you see this movie, and if you see the sequel, When a Stranger Calls Back, which I strongly recommend, definitely watch When a Stranger Calls Back. This movie is good. When a Stranger Calls Back, that movie is phenomenal. The acting is superb. It's a really well done film. I strongly recommend When a Stranger Calls Back, but I recommend this one as well. Okay, so you got Jill Johnson, played by Carol Kane here. She's a young girl, still in high school, and she's going to babysit, for this family called the Mandrakas. And so she gets there. It's getting late. You have a nice cameo appearance from Rutanya Alda. Who's a wonderful human being. She's a great person. You'll recognize her from movies like Amityville 2, The Possession, and The Deer Hunter, Rocky 2, Mommy Dearest, on and on. The Dark Half, she's a wonderful lady, and if you ever get a chance, get on Facebook and, try to get her to send her a friend request, or at the very least follow her. She's a wonderful human being, and I can't recommend her enough. She's just such a lovely person. But anyway, so they go, she goes to babysit, and she's informed that, the kids are already bed asleep, and so, they're gonna, go out to dinner, go see a movie, and they'll probably be home. So Jill is, she's at the house, she's babysitting, she's talking to one of her girlfriends on the phone, kind of like Halloween, where the girls are always talking on the phone, spend a lot of time on the phone, right? And so she's talking about, this guy that she likes, Bobby, and all this stuff. And, she asks her friend, hey, if you see Bobby, give him this number and, tell him to give me a call. So she's sitting there, she's doing her homework and stuff. And then she gets, she gets a phone call. And, person on the other end of the phone says, have you checked? Well, at first they don't say anything. But then the phone rings again and she picks it up and, the voice on the other end says, have you checked the children? And at first she's like, what? She's taken aback by this. But then he continues to call. And every time he calls, have you checked the children? Have you checked the children? And she's like, I don't understand. Clearly, you already see, if you're hip to urban legends and things, you already know where this is going. So, at one point, she gets a phone call and, she's getting kind of really scared here. And, she's in this big dark house. She's all alone. It's very suspenseful. It's very intense. And, she's getting where she's having enough of this. So she calls the police, and at first they're just kind of like, nah, they're just blowing it off like there's nothing they can do. And so she just, no, okay. So, and then the guy keeps calling. It just keeps saying the same thing, have you checked the children? Have you checked the children? And at one point, it's like she picks up the phone, and then the guy on the other end of the phone says, why haven't you checked the children? And so now she's really freaking out, as anybody obviously would. So Jill, she calls the police, and she's crying. She's, near hysteria and everything. And she's asking them, can you please do something about this? And so they finally tell her, well, we'll go ahead and we'll try to trace the call. But, you need to try to keep the guy on for at least a minute so we can trace the call. And she's like, he won't stay on but a few seconds. Like, well, if you can't get him to stay on the phone for, at least a minute so we can trace the call, there's nothing we could do to help you. And so she finally agrees to this and stuff. He's like, okay, we'll be watching your phone. So the guy finally calls, and, he tells her, and she's like, I'm getting ready to go home. The doctor and his wife are coming home and all this stuff. And she's like, you really scared me if that's what you wanted. And she's like, was that what you wanted? And he's like, no. She's like, well, what did you want? And he says, your blood all over me. And so she's like, she informs him that she did call the police. And so now, time is of the essence here. And she gets a call. She picks up the phone. She says, leave me alone. And it's the sergeant. He's like, Jill, we traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Squad car is on the way, but get out of that house. And so just as she's reaching the front door and everything, she's about ready to go out. She happens to look upstairs, and she sees, the door open, and there's a light coming from the bedroom, and she sees a shadow appear, and she manages to get the door open. And just as she opens the door, standing there is Charles Durning, the late great Charles Durning, who, it's amazing. I would recommend, if you want to really get like a good, kind of a good idea of Charles Durning's acting range, I would say watch this, and then watch it as like a double feature with Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. And you see like his acting is like almost two completely different styles almost. And Charles Durning is fantastic. He plays Detective John Clifford. And so, he's informed that, this guy, his name is Kurt Duncan, played by Tony Beckley, and unfortunately this was the last movie that he was in before he passed away. But this guy, Kurt Duncan, he broke into the house and he murdered the children, and he was covered in their blood. They had an old phone upstairs that he was able to keep calling the babysitter from. And so, but Carol Kane's character, Jill, she's okay and everything else. And then, we fade to black. Sorry. Then it's 7 years later, and Kirk Duncan has escaped from, the mental hospital. Kind of reminds me of another movie, though, doesn't it? So anyway, so he escapes, and he's out in the city, and John Clifford is, talking to Dr. Mandrakis, and he's saying, I'll find him, and, I'll catch him, and all this other kind of stuff. But it turns out that this case, these murdered children, has really taken a toll on Clifford, and has really, bent his psyche and everything. And he's of the opinion, he has no intentions of just catching this guy and turning him over to the authorities. He wants to kill this guy. He is vengeful. He is angry. He's out for blood. He wants this guy dead. He doesn't want to just put him away where he could possibly escape again. He just wants to find this guy, and he wants to stop his clock. So the character Kirk Duncan, he's in the city, and he's in a bar, and so he meets this woman, Tracy, played by Colleen Dewhurst, who, you will remember, she was in the movie The Dead Zone. She played Frank Dodd's mother. She knew that he was killing all the girls and stuff like that. So, and so Kirk starts like, trying to build up a friendship with her, trying to get close to her and everything else. And she very much has a wall put up. She's, like trying not to let anybody in. And so he just keeps kind of coming around and like little bit by little bit, he's like trying to chip away at her, trying to get her to, lower her guard and be friends with him so that he can have a way in with her. And eventually, she does kind of realize, like, yeah, this guy, he's a psycho killer and everything else. And, as this is going on, simultaneously, you have Charles Durning's character, investigating, trying to find out, like, how Duncan got out of the insane asylum, where he could be, tracking him, tracing him, and everything else. And so, and he does let it be known, to his friends, at the precinct and stuff like that. It's like, I find this guy, it's like, I'm not turning him in. I find him, I'm going to kill him, and stuff like that. And, like, if anybody's like, dude, you can't do that and all that stuff, he's like, you got kids? What if it was your kids, that he killed? And so then, he's closing in on him, and then we get to the third act where Duncan decides he wants to finish what he started with Jill Johnson. And so he goes and he's able to find her, and now, she's married, she has children of her own, and he's closing in. And so now, Clifford has to stop him, and, it's all this kind of stuff. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and I could give away more, but I think I'll just go ahead and leave it at that. This movie is really good. There is a problem, though. The first, like, 20, 30 minutes of this movie are super tense, incredibly scary, very well done, very suspenseful. The movie's not particularly gory, okay? So if you're going in hoping for a gore fest, no, you're not going to get that. But what this movie lacks in gore and blood and all that stuff, it definitely makes up for in atmosphere, terror, suspense, and just overall fear and dread. That's what this movie makes up for in that. I will say, though, the first act is phenomenal. Such a build-up, but here's the problem. Everything afterwards does kind of seem a bit anticlimactic. The second act of the movie just kind of drags, and it's not really enough to, I admit, there have been times like I've put this movie on and I'll watch the first act, and then I admit I've skipped over just to get to the third act, and just kind of do away with it, It's just, unfortunately, the second act really does kind of bog this movie down, I feel. It's not horrible, but it's just, kind of like, really the first and the third act is really what keeps you into this movie. And that's what really draws you in. And I will say that is one advantage that the sequel, When a Stranger Calls Back, has over this movie. That movie throughout is very thoroughly entertaining. It's a good build-up, very well done, great characterization. The acting by Carol Kane and Charles Durning in both films, absolutely perfect, bar none. They do phenomenal jobs. And then you get Jill Sholin in, When a Stranger Calls Back. Her acting, it's irritating that this movie did not get a theatrical release, because if you saw Jill Sholin's performance in that movie, you would think this woman deserved an Oscar for that acting, as Carol Kane and Charles Durning do as well. Okay, but overall, yes, I definitely recommend When a Stranger Calls. It is genuinely frightening. It's very well done. You're definitely going to see hints of both Halloween and Black Christmas in this movie, so be prepared for that. But overall, just phenomenal movie. The sequel is also fantastic. I recommend both movies. Like I said, though, be prepared in this movie. The second act does kind of drag. So it's kind of like the first and the third act is really what's going to keep you into it. But there is a remake to this movie, which avoid it. Just avoid it like the plague. Don't even bother. The remake is so watered down. It's so PG. It's so just nothing. Just don't even bother with the remake. Just stick with this. Stick with this. Watch the sequel. That's all you need. Promise. And nice little fun little tidbit of detail is in case if you're ever curious about the short film The Sitter from 1977 that was able to spawn into this movie, if you can get the Blu-ray from Scream Factory, that little film is included as a bonus feature on When a Stranger Calls Back. So definitely something to look out for. So, but yeah, overall, definitely When a Stranger Calls, get it. You're gonna like it. So that's pretty much going to be it for me. So if anybody took the time to watch this, I thank you for doing it. I appreciate you for doing it. I know it's probably very annoying because my videos tend to be pretty long, but I'm sorry. Once I get talking, sorry. But anyway, so yeah, anybody watch this, I appreciate you for doing it. I honestly hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a like. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the BodyBags channel. We have a different reviewer, one for every day of the week. I'm the Saturday reviewer. We have a great bunch of guys. Everybody's doing good stuff. And, it's so good, and we have more theme weeks coming up. We got some really fun stuff coming. At least I think it's fun. And, yeah. And like next week, I get to go back to, talking about my, doing my month of Stephen King miniseries. So I'm looking forward to that too. So that's it, everybody. Take care. Have a good night. And I'll see you later.